My father gave our family business, where I worked for 10 years, to my stepbrother and kicked me out. You know what's funny about small towns in Georgia? Everyone knows your business before you do. I grew up in Millersville, population 3,742 on a good day, where the biggest excitement was when the Dollar General started selling beer. My life revolved around Kelly's Auto Shop, the family business my grandpa built from nothing back in '78. Kelly's wasn't just a garage. It was home. The smell of motor oil, the country music crackling through an ancient radio, and that faded sign on the wall reading, "Honesty is our engine." That sign was crooked for 15 years, but nobody dared straighten it because Grandpa said it had character. I started working there when I was 15, washing tools and sweeping floors for $5 an hour. By 17, I was changing oil and fixing flat tires. By 20, I could diagnose engine troubles just by listening, like some automotive whisperer. Grandpa used to brag about me to his buddies at the VFW. That boy's got oil in his veins instead of blood. Grandpa wasn't just teaching me mechanics. He was teaching me life. "Travis," he'd say while we hunched over an old Chevy engine, "cars are like people. Find what's broken and give him new life." Then he'd wink and add, "And always charge fair. Karma's got a longer warranty than any parts we sell." Those 10 years at Kelly's were the happiest of my life. Working side by side with Grandpa, learning everything he knew. The business wasn't fancy, but it was honest. People trusted us with their vehicles because we never cut corners or inflated bills. In a town where most folks lived paycheck to paycheck, that meant something. Then Grandpa died. Heart attack. Quick and sudden while watching a Braves game. He was drinking a Budweiser 1 minute, gone the next. The funeral was packed. Seemed like the whole county showed up. Everyone had a story about how Grandpa had helped them out or done them right. That's when everything changed. See, my dad never really had Grandpa's touch with engines or with people. He was the business guy, handling accounts while Grandpa and I got our hands dirty. 2 months after the funeral, he remarried. Linda was nice enough at first. Baked casseroles, called me sweetie. Then her son Chad moved to town. Chad, 28 years old, and walking around like a discount tire commercial come to life. Slick back hair, polo shirts with the collar popped, and absolutely zero knowledge about cars. But boy, could he talk about business strategies and modernization and profit margins. Kelly's needs to enter the 21st century, he announced during a family dinner, chewing with his mouth open. We could double profits in 6 months if we cut some corners. That's when Linda started working on Dad. Chad has an MBA, from University of Phoenix. Online, he knows how to run a real business. I sat there, silent. A decade of grease under my fingernails and Grandpa's wisdom in my head, watching as they pushed me to the sidelines of my own life. Dad started bringing Chad to the shop, giving him a desk, letting him look through our books. All while I kept fixing cars, kept the actual business running. The customers noticed. Old Mr. Peterson, who'd been coming to Kelly since before I was born, pulled me aside one day. That new fella tried to charge me double for a radiator flush. Your grandpa would have never stood for that. I thought about Grandpa's sign. Honesty is our engine. I couldn't let them ruin everything he built. So I came up with a plan. I'd been reading about these tech startups, how they were changing old industries. Why not auto repair? I spent weeks designing an idea, an app called AutoBuddy. Customers could schedule repairs, watch live video of mechanics working on their cars, see transparent pricing. No more mystery about what was happening behind the garage doors. I was so proud when I presented it at our monthly staff meeting. I'd made slides, cost projections, everything. I thought Dad would be impressed by my initiative. Instead, he laughed. Actually laughed. This is Georgia, son, not Hollywood. Our customers don't want fancy apps. They want their trucks fixed cheap and fast. Chad smirked from across the table. Wait, you want customers to watch Netflix about their brake pads? Next, you'll suggest we start a TikTok dance trend for oil changes. Everyone laughed. The mechanics, the receptionist, Dad, Linda, everyone except me. I tried to explain that transparency builds trust, that younger customers expect technology, that we could expand beyond Millersville. But Chad kept interrupting, kept making jokes at my expense, kept reminding everyone of his MBA. Finally, I lost it. Grandpa built this place on honesty, not cutting corners for profit. This app stays true to that while moving us forward. I've given 10 years to this shop. I know what our customers need better than someone who can't tell a wrench from a hammer. The room went silent. Dad's face turned that dangerous shade of red I knew too well. "Travis," he said quietly, "either you get on board with Chad Vision or you can walk out that door." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father choosing this stranger over me, over Grandpa's legacy. "You're making a mistake," I said. "Chad will run this place into the ground." Dad stood up. "That's enough. Your grandfather was a good mechanic, but times change. Chad understands business. Now make your choice." I looked around at the shop, the tools I'd organized 1,000 times, the lift where Grandpa taught me to change my first transmission, the crooked sign on the wall. Then I looked at Chad's smug face. I unclipped the wrench from my belt, the one Grandpa gave me for my 18th birthday, and dropped it on the concrete floor. The clang echoed to the suddenly silent garage. I quit. 3 days later, I was living in a crappy apartment by the railroad tracks, where freight trains rattled my windows at 3 a.m. The place came furnished with what looked like a murder victim's mattress and a kitchen table that wobbled worse than a bad tire alignment. I had exactly $7,853 in my checking account, a duffel bag of clothes, and a dog-eared photo of me and Grandpa standing in front of Kelly's on my 16th birthday. In the picture, his arms around my shoulders, and we're both grinning like we got the world figured out. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of those trains and wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I applied for mechanic jobs at other shops, but word travels fast in small towns. Somehow, every place was not hiring right now. Chad's doing, I was sure of it. I tried not to think about Kelly's, about how Chad was probably changing everything Grandpa built. I tried not to imagine Dad realizing his mistake too late. Instead, I focused on my idea, AutoBuddy. I sketched app designs on napkins, wrote code tutorials, tried to figure out how someone with grease monkey hands could build a tech company. After 2 weeks of ramen noodles and self-pity, I found myself lying on that terrible mattress, listening to the 10:15 freight train rumbling past. The walls shook, the lights flickered, and I wondered if this was really the end of my story. 25 years old, unemployed, cut off from the only life I'd ever known. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. Find what's broken and give it new life. But what if the broken thing was me? Then I heard something else over the train's fading horn, a knock at my door, 3 sharp raps that changed everything. I had no idea that opening that door would be the first step in proving my father wrong, making Chad eat his words, and building something bigger than Kelly's ever was. But that's exactly what happened. And it all started with that knock. I opened my door expecting a drunk neighbor or maybe the landlord complaining about something. Instead, I found a gray-haired man in his 60s wearing a faded Atlanta Falcons t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. His face was weathered like an old baseball glove, and he stood with the slight hunch of someone who'd spent too many years hunched over a desk. "Name's Derek," he said with a slight nod. "Apartment 4B. My Buick's making a noise like a blender full of nickels. Building manager says you're a mechanic." I leaned against my doorframe, suddenly self-conscious about my ratty sweatpants and 3-day stubble. "Former mechanic. Currently unemployed." He shrugged. "Still no cars, though, right?" "I'll pay cash." I couldn't help but smirk. If your car's older than me, I can't promise miracles. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, the closest thing to a smile I'd seen from him. 1987 Buick Grand National. And I'm not looking for miracles, just someone who knows a carburetor from a catalytic converter. The Grand National, one of the coolest sleeper cars of the 80s. My curiosity was piqued. Plus, I needed the money. 20 minutes later, I was under the hood of a beautifully maintained black Buick in the apartment complex's cracked parking lot. The problem was simple. Loose belt tensioner causing a harmonic rattle. 30 minutes of work, and it purred like a panther again. Derek handed me a $100 bill. When I tried to make change, He waved me off. Worth every penny to not get gouged by the dealership. He hesitated, then added, "If you're looking for work, my neighbor 2 floors down needs help with his son's moped." That's how it started. My unofficial mechanic business. Word spread through the building, then to the next. Soon I was fixing bikes, mopeds, lawn mowers, anything with an engine for cash. Not exactly the career I planned, but it kept me afloat. But working under a shade tree wasn't going to cut it long term. I needed something stable, so I took a second job delivering pizzas for Sal's on my old Ford Ranger. 12-hour days became my new normal. Fix engines in the morning, deliver pies at night, crash on that awful mattress for a few hours, then do it all again. The money was okay, but I felt hollow. This wasn't the life I was meant for. Every time I handed over a pepperoni pizza to some family in their comfortable home, I'd remember the plans I had, the ideas that Chad and my dad had laughed at. So I started taking online coding courses during my breaks. Figured if I wanted to build an app, I should at least understand how they worked. I'd sit at the pizza place after closing, watching tutorials on my phone while eating leftover breadsticks. Let me tell you, coding makes absolutely no sense to a guy who spent his life fixing tangible things. It was like trying to have a conversation with aliens. I'd stare at lines of code until my eyes burned, then delete everything in frustration. One night, I threw my phone across the room after spending 3 hours on a bug that turned out to be a missing semicolon. On those long nights, I'd drive home with my windows down, blasting Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road, Grandpa's favorite. He always said Springsteen understood the working man better than any politician ever would. The lyrics about breaking free and finding something better hit different when you're delivering pizzas at 35 with grease under your fingernails and dreams slipping away. One evening, while struggling with a particularly nasty coding tutorial, I noticed Derek sitting alone on the building's shabby excuse for a patio, nursing a beer. On impulse, I grabbed 2 more beers from my fridge and joined him. We didn't talk much that first night. Just sat there, drinking in silence, watching cars pass on the highway. But it became our routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we'd share beers and eventually stories. I learned Derek wasn't just some retiree killing time. He'd been the technical director for a healthcare startup in Atlanta, the guy who actually built the product while the idea guys took the credit. The company had been on the verge of acquisition when his wife of 17 years decided she wanted out. Their prenup had a clause about company equity earned during marriage. One messy divorce later, he walked away with almost nothing while she became a millionaire when the company sold 6 months later. "Lost my job, too," he explained one night, staring into his beer. New owners brought in their own technical team, 25 years of experience, and suddenly I was too old and too expensive. I asked why he didn't just find another tech job. He laughed without humor. Tech doesn't want 58-year-old programmers. They want 22-year-olds who will work 80 hours a week for stock options and free snacks. He took a long pull from his beer before adding, "Trust is like an engine without oil. Burns up in seconds, leaves nothing but wreckage behind." Our friendship grew beyond those patio beers. When Derek caught the flu that was making rounds through the building, I picked up groceries and cold medicine for him. When my Ford broke down, he lent me his Buick for pizza deliveries. Small kindnesses that meant everything when you're starting over. One night, after my 3rd failed attempt at getting through a JavaScript course, I unloaded about my app idea, pulled out all my sketches and notes, explained my vision for transparent auto repair. I wasn't even sure why I was telling him. Maybe just needed someone to listen who wouldn't laugh. Derek studied my napkin sketches with an unreadable expression. "So you want farmers in Georgia to download an app to fix their tractors?" For a moment, he sounded just like Chad. My heart sank, but I stood my ground. People are tired of getting ripped off. They want honesty, not another Chad charging them double for work they don't need. Derek took off his glasses, cleaned them methodically with his shirt. The tech is doable. Live video streaming, appointment scheduling, transparent pricing, nothing groundbreaking. But the user adoption curve would be steep. Auto repair isn't exactly an industry known for innovation. I must have looked deflated because he quickly added, "That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Just means you need to think about your go-to-market strategy." He asked questions I hadn't considered. How would mechanics feel about being filmed? Would the app handle payments or just scheduling? What about parts pricing and sourcing? For the first time, someone was taking my idea seriously, not laughing or dismissing it, but poking holes to make it stronger. We talked until 2 a.m., my pizza getting cold, his beer getting warm. Finally, he yawned and stood up. Let me think about it. Been a while since I've had a problem worth solving. A week passed with no mention of AutoBuddy. I figured he'd lost interest or decided it was a stupid idea after all. I went back to my 2 jobs. Try not to feel disappointed. Then late Friday night, someone knocked on my door. Derek stood there holding a laptop and a thick folder. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much. Without a word, he pushed past me into my apartment and spread papers across my wobbly kitchen table. "I've been thinking about your app," he said, opening his laptop. Made some wireframes, architecture diagrams, cost projections. I stare at professional-looking designs and technical specs that made my napkin sketches look like a child's doodles. "You did all this? Why?" He didn't look up from his laptop. "Been writing code since before the internet existed. This is the most interesting problem I've seen in years. Besides," he gestured vaguely at the apartment building around us, "not like I got a lot else going on." He pulled up a presentation that laid out everything, from user interface to server architecture to marketing plan. It was AutoBuddy, but better than I'd imagined. More comprehensive, more professional. "There's a catch," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "I want 40% equity. I know that sounds high, but you need more than just an idea to make this work. You need someone who can actually build it." I couldn't argue with that. My coding attempts had been disasters, and hiring developers with my pizza delivery money wasn't happening. 50-50, I countered, equal partners. You build it, I handle the auto industry side. And if this thing crashes and burns, I'll tell everyone it was my fault. Derek actually smiled. A real one this time, not just a twitch of the lips. "I'm in, but if we fail, I'm telling everyone you forced me into it at gunpoint." I laughed. "Deal. Best offer I've had since I got fired." That night marked the beginning of AutoBuddy. Derek coding late into the night, while I worked my 2 jobs and reached out to mechanics I knew from my Kelly's days. We converted my tiny living room into an office, with whiteboards made from dry erase paint on the walls, goodbye security deposit, and endless coffee cups everywhere. Derek taught me enough about technology to be dangerous. Not enough to code, but enough to understand what was possible. I taught him about cars, about the pain points in the industry, about what customers and honest mechanics both wanted. We worked every spare minute. I'd come home from delivering pizzas at midnight to find Derek still at his laptop, cursing at some bug or celebrating a breakthrough. On Sundays, my only day off, we'd work for 14 hours straight, breaking only for delivered Chinese food and occasional power naps. For the first time since leaving Kelly's, I felt alive again. This wasn't just about getting back at Chad or proving my dad wrong anymore. This was about building something meaningful, something that could change an industry stuck in the past. Derek became more than a partner. He became family. The grumpy uncle I never had, full of tech wisdom and cynical jokes. When I get discouraged, he'd remind me that Facebook started in a dorm room and Apple in a garage. "At least our apartment has indoor plumbing," he'd point out. "We're already ahead of Steve Jobs." 3 weeks into development, I ran into Mrs. Winters at the grocery store. She was one of our regulars at Kelly's, a sweet older lady with a Subaru that needed constant attention. She asked what I was up to these days, and I got carried away explaining AutoBuddy, how it would transform auto repair, bring transparency to the industry, let customers see exactly what was happening to their vehicles. She seemed genuinely excited for me. "That sounds wonderful, Travis. Much better than working for that awful Chad person." I didn't think much about our conversation until I got a call from Mike, one of the few mechanics at Kelly's who still talked to me. He warned me that I'd been a topic at their staff meeting. Apparently, Mrs. Winters had taken her car in for an oil change and innocently mentioned to Chad how thrilled she was about Travis's clever app that would let people see repairs happening. 2 days later, I noticed a familiar truck parked across from our building, one of Chad's buddies from Kelly's, sitting there watching our apartment. He drove off when I approached. That's when I knew Chad had caught wind of what we were doing. And knowing Chad, he wouldn't just sit back and let us succeed. The game was on. 3 days after spotting Chad's spy truck, I got another call from Mike at Kelly's. He was speaking in a hushed tone, like someone might be listening. Dude, I thought you should know. Chad's on the warpath about some app you're building. Mrs. Winters mentioned it, and he completely lost it in the break room. Started yelling about how you're trying to steal family business secrets or something. I almost laughed. The only secret at Kelly's was which drawer we hid the good coffee in. What exactly did he say? I asked, suddenly concerned about how far Chad might take this. According to Mike, Chad had been ranting to anyone who would listen that I was a disgruntled ex-employee trying to sabotage Kelly's Auto by stealing their client list. He'd even started telling customers that I'd been fired for incompetence, not that I'd walked out. Classic Chad move, rewriting history to make himself the hero. But I had bigger concerns than Chad's ego. Derek and I needed space to work. My tiny apartment was driving us both crazy. We'd knock elbows every time we turned around, and my neighbors were getting tired of hearing technical discussions about back-end infrastructure at 2 a.m. Through one of my moped repair clients, we found a small garage for rent on the outskirts of town. It was nothing fancy. Concrete floor with oil stains older than me, flickering fluorescent lights, and a bathroom that looked like something from a horror movie. But it had decent internet, space for our equipment, and most importantly, it was ours. The day we moved in, Derek looked around the grimy space and smirked. Silicon Valley, eat your heart out. I surveyed our new headquarters. 2 folding tables from Walmart, our laptops, a coffee maker with no auto-off function, our most dangerous piece of equipment, and a mini fridge stocked with energy drinks and leftover pizza. On the wall, I'd hung Grandpa's old sign that I'd managed to grab before leaving Kelly's. Honesty is our engine. If this doesn't work out, I joked, wiping grease from an old workbench, I'm opening a hot dog stand. Less complicated than coding. Derek didn't miss a beat. Only if I can be your accountant. I looked good in one of those green visors. That garage became our world. I'd work on cars during the day. Word had spread about my mobile mechanic service, and I was making enough to quit the pizza delivery job. Then from 6 p.m. until midnight or later, Derek and I would work on AutoBuddy. The app was taking shape faster than we'd expected. Derek had built a prototype that did everything I'd imagined, and then some. Customers could book appointments, see real-time video of repairs, get transparent pricing, and rate their experience. For mechanics, there was a dashboard to manage bookings, send quotes, and showcase their expertise. No more mystery about what happened behind garage doors. The hardest part was figuring out how mechanics could stream repairs without interrupting their work. I'd experimented with different solutions before landing on our winner. Small, lightweight cameras that clipped onto a mechanic's baseball cap or attached to a flexible gooseneck mount that could be positioned anywhere in the work area. But Derek took it to another level when he suggested integrating AI into the system. What if we build an AI that understands car anatomy? He proposed one night, eyes bloodshot from coding, but still excited. It could identify parts, follow the repair process, and automatically switch between camera views to give customers the best angle. I was skeptical at first. AI seemed like science fiction. But Derek showed me how modern machine learning models could be trained to recognize automotive components and understand repair sequences. We spent weeks feeding the system repair manuals, diagrams, and videos of me working on different vehicles. The result was remarkable. We called it AI Buddy. It could track what the mechanic was doing, automatically switch to the optimal camera view, and even provide simple explanations to customers watching the repair. If a customer had questions about what they were seeing, they could ask Buddy directly through the app, and it would explain in plain English what the mechanic was doing and why. The whole setup cost less than $200 per bay, and we included it free with premium subscriptions. It was revolutionary, not just a passive video feed, but an interactive experience that demystified auto repair. I reached out to a few honest mechanics I knew from my Kelly's days. Guys who did quality work, but struggled to compete with franchise operations and their massive marketing budgets. I offered them free access to test our beta version. The first was Joey Thompson, who ran a two-bay shop specializing in Japanese imports. He was skeptical at first. People don't want to watch me fix their Subaru, Travis. They just want it fixed. But he agreed to try it. A week later, he called me, excitement in his voice. This thing is incredible. Had a lady with a Civic who needed her brakes done. She watched the whole job on her phone while sitting at her office. The AI automatically zoomed in on the worn brake pads and explained the difference between them and the new ones I was installing. When she asked about the rotors, Buddy showed her the scoring on the surface and explained why they needed machining. When she picked up the car, she already knew exactly what I'd done and why. No questions, no suspicion. Even tipped me $20. Then came Ray from Classic Car Restoration, who used AutoBuddy to show a client in California the progress on his vintage Mustang restoration. The client was so impressed with the transparency in Buddy's detailed explanations of the restoration process that he referred 3 friends. Even old man Jenkins, who'd been fixing farm equipment since the Nixon administration and thought smartphones were government tracking devices, admitted the app was not completely useless. After Buddy correctly identified a faulty hydraulic valve on a tractor, high praise from him. We were on to something big. Derek's code was solid. My industry knowledge was filling in the gaps, and Buddy was getting smarter with every repair it witnessed. Our test mechanics were giving us real-world feedback that made each version better than the last. But we needed money to scale. Server costs, AI processing power, app store fees, marketing. It all added up. My savings from Kelly's were dwindling, and Derek had burned through most of his retirement fund already. We needed an investor. Through a friend of Derek's, we got a meeting with an actual venture capitalist from Atlanta, Ron Peterson of Peachtree Partners. We spent a week preparing our pitch, rehearsing answers to every possible question, polishing our prototype until it shined. The meeting was at a fancy downtown restaurant where the menu didn't even list prices. I wore my only suit, the one from Grandpa's funeral, and hoped Ron wouldn't notice it was a size too small now. We made our pitch, showed the prototype, demonstrated how Buddy could identify parts and explain repairs in real time, outlined our growth strategy. Ron asked good questions, nodded at our answers, seemed genuinely interested. Then he leaned back in his chair and delivered the verdict. Look, the product is solid. The AI component is impressive. The problem is real. But this is Georgia, not Silicon Valley. The adoption curve for something like this in the auto repair industry would be too slow for our investment timeline. We need 10x returns in 5 years. I just don't see that happening here. It was a blow, but not a knockout. We thanked him for his time and drove back to our garage in silence. That night, Derek and I sat on folding chairs, drinking beers, staring at our whiteboards full of dreams. We don't need those suits, Derek finally said. We bootstrapped this ourselves. Grow slower, but keep control. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was Facebook. I raised my beer. To building Rome in a garage that smells like motor oil. We were back at it the next day. Derek coding, me reaching out to every mechanic I'd ever met. We couldn't afford marketing, so we relied on word of mouth. Every satisfied customer, every impressed mechanic became our sales force. Slowly, it was working. We had 12 shops using AutoBuddy regularly, then 25. Real customers leaving real reviews. Many mentioned Buddy by name, saying how helpful it was to have the AI explain what they were seeing. It's like having a knowledgeable friend looking over a mechanic's shoulder. One review said, the App Store rating hit 4.7 stars. We weren't making much money yet. The free tier was generous to get people hooked, but growth was steady. That's when a family friend showed up. I was working alone in the garage one evening. Derek had a doctor's appointment. When a black Cadillac Escalade pulled up, out stepped a guy in his 50s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive-looking suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Travis Kelly, he extended his hand. Name's Richard Hartwell. I'm an old friend of your father's. Mind if we chat? My guard went up immediately, but I was raised with manners. I invited him in, cleared some papers from a chair, offered him coffee from our questionable machine. Your dad and I go way back, Richard said, declining the coffee with a glance at our stained mugs. He's worried about you, son. This rift between you two, it's not good for the family. I stayed silent, waiting for the real purpose of his visit. I heard you're working on some kind of app for auto repair. With AI components? Sounds fascinating. Your father thinks there might be a way to bring you back into the fold. Maybe implement your ideas at Kelly's, under the family banner. My heart jumped. Was this for real? Dad actually acknowledging my idea had merit? Maybe even an apology? Is my dad ready to talk to me directly? I asked. Richard waved his hand dismissively. He's a proud man, you know that. But he sent me as a first step. Why don't you tell me more about this app of yours? The technical details, how the AI works, the business model? I can bring it all back to him. Start the healing process. Something felt off. Dad wasn't the type to send messengers, and he certainly wasn't the type to admit he was wrong through a third party. How exactly do you know my father? I asked. Richard's smile tightened. Golf club. We play every Sunday. Look, I'm just trying to help your family reconcile. Don't you want that? I did want that. Desperately. But on honest terms. Not whatever this was. I appreciate you coming by, I said, standing up. If my dad wants to talk about AutoBuddy, he knows where to find me. Richard's friendly facade cracked. Don't be stupid, kid. Chad says your app is just a Kelly's ripoff with some fancy AI gimmick. Your dad could sue you into oblivion for intellectual property theft. Or you could be smart and take the olive branch I'm offering. And there it was. Not an olive branch. A threat, and not from my dad. From Chad. I walked to the door and held it open. Tell Chad, I said, to get a better spy next time. And remind him that dishonesty voids a warranty on life. After Richard left, I called Derek and told him what happened. He wasn't surprised. Classic corporate espionage attempt. They're scared, Travis. They wouldn't bother if you weren't onto something big. I wasn't feeling quite so philosophical. What if they do sue us? We can't afford lawyers. Derek laughed. For what? Using honesty in auto repair? There's no patent on not ripping people off. Besides, we have something they don't. What's that? Proof of concept. 25 shops using our system successfully. Real customers loving it, and Buddy becoming their trusted guide to auto repair. We're not just talking about transparency, we're actually doing it. He was right. And thinking about Grandpa's wisdom, honesty is not a choice, it's a rule. Gave me strength. We weren't doing anything wrong. We were trying to make an industry better, more trustworthy. If Chad and my dad couldn't see that, it was their loss. The next morning, I found our garage door spray painted with the word Trader in red. The security camera we'd installed after moving and captured the whole thing. One of Chad's drinking buddies, not even trying to hide his face. I could have called the cops, filed a report. Instead, I painted over it and got back to work. We had bigger problems than Chad's childish tactics. The beta version of AutoBuddy had started glitching when too many video streams were active at once, and Buddy sometimes misidentified parts on older, non-standard vehicles. Derek spent 3 days straight tracking down the issues, surviving on nothing but coffee and determination. I took over his mechanic outreach calls, explaining our vision to shop owners across the state. By month's end, we'd fixed the glitches and added 10 more shops to our platform. Buddy had learned from hundreds of repairs and could now identify parts from almost any vehicle on the road. A local tech blog wrote a small piece about the AI-powered Uber of auto repair starting in our town, which brought a flood of new users. We were growing faster than our infrastructure could handle. Derek and I were working 18-hour days, sleeping on cots in the garage, showering at the gym down the street. It wasn't sustainable, but it was necessary. We were so close to breaking through. Then came the email from Silicon Valley. A major tech incubator had somehow found our app, been impressed by our AI integration, and wanted to talk. They were offering seed funding, mentorship, connections, everything we needed to scale nationally. The catch? We'd need to relocate to California, leave Georgia, leave the battleground with Chad, leave the few connections I still had to my old life. I took a walk that night, thinking about Grandpa, about what he'd built with Kelly's, about roots and wings and knowing when to stay and when to fly. The stars over Georgia were bright, the air humid but comforting in its familiarity. When I got back to the garage, Derek was waiting with 2 beers. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking Chad inadvertently did us a favor," I replied. "By trying to bury us, he forced us to grow stronger roots." Derek nodded slowly. "So we stay and fight?" I clinked my bottle against his. "We stay and build. Let Chad play his games. We're creating something real here. Buddy and AutoBuddy together are changing how people think about auto repair. It's something Grandpa would be proud of." We declined the Silicon Valley offer, instead negotiating a smaller investment that let us stay in Georgia. We hired our first employee, a local college kid with a computer science degree who reminded me of a younger Derek. He helped us improve Buddy's AI capabilities even further, teaching it to predict potential issues based on the sound a car was making. We upgraded our servers, improved the app's stability, and focused on growing shop by shop, customer by customer. AutoBuddy wasn't just an app anymore. It was a community of honest mechanics and appreciative customers, built on the foundation transparency that Grandpa had taught me years ago at Kelly's. Buddy had become the friendly, knowledgeable guide that customers trusted, bridging the knowledge gap that had allowed dishonest shops to thrive for decades. We were on the verge of something big. I could feel it. The app was working smoothly, new shops were signing up every week, and our revenue was finally more than our expenses. But I knew Chad well enough to know he wouldn't give up easily. The garage door incident and the fake family friend were just opening salvos. He was planning something bigger, something designed to crush us completely. I just didn't know what it was yet. Chad's next move came faster than I expected. Mike called me on a Tuesday morning, his voice urgent. "Dude, you need to see this. Chad just unveiled something called Kelly's Connect at the staff meeting. It's a complete ripoff of your app. Security cameras in the bays, tablets for customers to watch repairs. He's telling everyone it was his idea all along." I wasn't surprised, just disappointed. "Is it any good?" Mike snorted. "It's like someone described your app to a 5-year-old who then explained it to their goldfish. The cameras are fixed in weird positions. The interface looks like a Windows 95 screensaver, and there's no AI component. Just a glorified security system he's trying to pass off as innovation." Even so, I was worried. Chad had the Kelly's name behind him, plus my dad's connections in town. He didn't need to build something better. He just needed to muddy the waters enough to slow us down. For the next month, it was a race. Chad cold called every shop in our network, offering them Kelly's Connect for free. He even ran ads in the local paper. Why use an untested app when you can trust the Kelly family name? But here's the thing about trust. You can't advertise your way into it. Our mechanics had seen AutoBuddy work. They'd experienced the difference Buddy made in customer satisfaction and transparency. Most importantly, their customers loved it. When Chad installed a system at 3 local competitors, it backfired spectacularly. Customers who'd used AutoBuddy elsewhere complained about the clunky interface and lack of interactive features. One shop owner told me they unplugged Chad's equipment after just 2 weeks because customers kept asking what the smart assistant was. Meanwhile, AutoBuddy was growing faster than we could handle. We hit 50 shops across Georgia, then expanded into neighboring states. Our tiny team was working around the clock, with Derek and our new developer constantly improving Buddy's capabilities. I was flying to Nashville, Charlotte, and Birmingham to onboard new mechanics, coming home only to sleep and change clothes. We weren't just expanding, we were evolving. Version 2.0 added digital payment processing, parts ordering integration, and maintenance reminders for customers. Buddy got smarter with every update, learning to identify problems from engine sounds and vibration patterns, sometimes spotting issues the mechanics themselves hadn't noticed yet. The real breakthrough came when Car and Driver magazine ran a small feature on us titled, "The App That's Changing How America Gets Car Repairs." Overnight, our download numbers tripled. Shops from all over the country were contacting us, wanted to join the network. We needed help. Derek and I hired 4 more developers, a customer service team, and a marketing specialist. We moved from our grimy garage to actual office space in a strip mall. Not exactly Google headquarters, but had reliable internet and bathrooms without mysterious stains. On the wall of our new office, I hung Grandpa's sign, "Honesty is our engine." Below it, Derek added a small plaque that read, "And Buddy is our co-pilot." 6 months after Chad's failed copycat attempt, we got the invitation that changed everything. AutoBuddy was selected to present at the National Auto Service Convention in Atlanta, the biggest industry gathering in the Southeast. Shop owners, parts manufacturers, tool companies, everyone who mattered in the auto repair world would be there. This was our chance to go truly national. Derek and I spent weeks preparing our presentation. We upgraded Buddy with new features specifically for the demo, created slick promotional materials, and even bought new clothes for the occasion. I actually own a suit that fit now, and Derek reluctantly agreed to wear something other than his faded Atlanta Falcons t-shirts. The night before the convention, we did one final rehearsal in our hotel room. "Just remember," Derek said, adjusting his unfamiliar tie, "we're not the underdogs anymore. We have 300 shops in our network, thousands of active users, and the best AI assistant in the industry. We belong here." I nodded, but my stomach was doing somersaults. This wasn't just about business success anymore. This was about vindication, about proving that honesty and innovation could coexist, about showing my dad and Chad that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. The convention center was massive, with hundreds of booths showcasing everything from new diagnostic tools to eco-friendly lubricants. Our presentation was scheduled for the main stage at 2 p.m. prime time. As we set up our equipment, I scanned the filling auditorium. That's when I saw them, Dad and Chad, sitting near the back, arms crossed, faces unreadable. Dad looked older than I remembered, with more gray in his hair. Chad still had that smugness that made you want to check your wallet after talking to him. Derek noticed him too. Well, look who decided to scope out the competition. I took a deep breath. Let's give them something to think about. The introduction from the convention organizer was brief, and then it was showtime. I stepped to the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces, and began. "My name is Travis Kelly. 2 years ago, I was a mechanic at my family's shop, trying to convince them that transparency wasn't just a buzzword. It was the future of our industry. They disagreed. Strongly. So strongly that I found myself unemployed, with nothing but an idea and a conviction that customers deserved better. I didn't look at Dad, but I could feel his eyes on me. Today, I want to show you what happened when that idea met reality. When we decided that honesty shouldn't be exceptional in auto repair, it should be the standard. The presentation went better than we'd dare hope. I demonstrated how easy it was for shops to join the platform, while Derek showed the customer interface and Buddy's capabilities. We brought up one of our partner mechanics via video call, who shared how AutoBuddy had increased his customer attention by 40%. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions. When we demonstrated Buddy's newest feature, the ability to create digital vehicle health records that track maintenance history across multiple shops, there was actual applause. At one point, I risked a glance toward the back row. Chad looked like he'd swallowed something sour. But Dad was leaning forward, watching intently. We finished with our vision for the future. AutoBuddy expanding nationwide, bringing transparency to an industry that desperately needed it, and Buddy evolving to help both mechanics and customers make better decisions about vehicle maintenance. We're not just changing how repairs are done. I concluded, we're rebuilding trust between mechanics and customers, one transparent repair at a time. The applause was overwhelming. People lined up to talk to us afterward, handing us business cards, asking about partnership opportunities. Even representatives from major manufacturer dealership networks wanted demos. Throughout it all, I kept glancing toward where Dad and Chad had been sitting, but they were gone. Part of me was disappointed. but mostly I was relieved. This day wasn't about them. It was about what we'd built. That evening, there was a reception for presenters and industry insiders. Derek and I were circulating, talking potential partners, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to find my father, standing there, alone. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, like he always did at formal events. For a moment, neither of us spoke. 2 years of silence hung between us like a wall. "Your presentation was good," he finally said, his voice gruff, very professional. Coming from Dad, this was equivalent to a standing ovation. "Thanks," I replied, unsure where this was going. He glanced around at the crowd of people, many of whom were clearly interested in talking to me. "Looks like you've done well for yourself." I nodded. "We've worked hard. Where's Chad?" Dad grimaced slightly. "Back at the hotel. He wasn't feeling well." Translation: Chad was sulking. "Your app?" Dad continued. "The AI part especially. It's impressive. Nothing like what Chad put together." The admission clearly cost him something. Dad had never been good at acknowledging when he was wrong. A server passed with champagne, and I grabbed 2 glasses, offering one to him. He took it hesitantly. "To innovation," I said, raising my glass. He clinked it against mine, then added quietly, "To family." We sipped in silence, the weight of unspoken words between us. Finally, I said what I'd been thinking for months. "Thank you for kicking me out." He looked startled. "I mean it," I continued. "If you hadn't forced me to leave, I never would have built AutoBuddy. Sometimes you need to lose everything to find what you're really capable of." Dad stared into his champagne. "That's not how I wanted things to go, but it's how they went, and look where we are now." He nodded slowly, then extended his hand. I took it, feeling the familiar calluses of a lifetime spent working on engines. His grip was firm, and as we shook, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition, respect. After Dad left, Derek sidled up to me. "Well, that looked intense. Family reunion." "Something like that," I replied, watching my father's retreating back. Little did I know that brief conversation was just the beginning of a seismic shift in both our lives. The weeks following the convention were a blur. We signed partnerships with over 50 new shops, got coverage in major tech publications, and fielded acquisition offers from 2 different software companies. But the biggest news came 6 months later, when a venture capital firm from Boston offered us $18 million for a 15% stake in AutoBuddy. The valuation was staggering. $108 million for a company that had started in my tiny apartment with napkin sketches and desperate hope. Derek and I celebrated by drinking cheap beer on the roof of our office building, reminiscing about how far we'd come. "Remember when you almost gave up on the JavaScript tutorials?" he asked, grinning. "Remember when you said you'd claim I forced you into this at gunpoint if we failed?" I countered. We laughed, watching the sunset over our small Georgia town, feeling like giants who had conquered the world. The investment allowed us to expand rapidly. We hired more developers, built a proper headquarters, and accelerated Buddy's AI capabilities. But there was something else I wanted to do, something personal. I bought a building on Main Street, just 2 blocks from Kelly's auto shop. It had been a failed restaurant, then a furniture store, sitting empty for nearly a year. Over 3 months, we transformed it into the most advanced auto repair shop in the state, maybe even the country. Kelly's Old Town Garage, I called it, with a nod to my grandfather's legacy. Every bay was equipped with AutoBuddy's latest technology. Mechanics wore augmented reality glasses that displayed repair instructions and vehicle history, and customers could watch their repairs from a comfortable lounge with free coffee and Wi-Fi. On the front of the building, I installed a neon sign that glowed at night. "Honesty is our engine." Below it, in smaller letters, "Established 2025. The grand opening was a local event. The mayor cut a ribbon, local TV stations sent reporters, and curious residents lined up to tour the facility. I'd hired the best mechanics I could find, including Mike, who'd finally gotten tired of Chad's management style at Kelly's. What I hadn't expected was to see my father there, standing awkwardly at the edge of the crowd. He waited until the official ceremonies were over before approaching me. "This is something else," he said, looking around at the gleaming facility. "Grandpa would have loved it." It was the highest compliment he could have given. "Want the tour?" I offered. He nodded, and I spent the next hour showing him everything. The technology, the transparent pricing model, the comfortable customer areas. He didn't say much, just nodded and observed. But I could tell he was impressed. As we finished the tour, standing in my new office with its view of Main Street, he finally asked a question that had been hanging between us. "Why here? Why not somewhere else, somewhere farther away?" I knew what he meant. Why open directly in competition with Kelly's? "Because this is home," I answered simply, "and because I want to show that there's room for both of us. Different approaches, different generations, but the same commitment to taking care of people's vehicles." He seemed to accept that, nodding thoughtfully. We parted with another handshake, firmer this time. As he turned to leave, he hesitated at the door. "You should come by the house sometime. Linda makes a decent pot roast on Sundays." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was close. Kelly's old town garage was an immediate success. People drove from neighboring counties to experience the garage of the future. Local news did a feature on us titled "Small Town, Big Innovation." One customer described us as SpaceX for pickup trucks, which became something of a catchphrase around town. Meanwhile, AutoBuddy continued to grow nationally. We hit the 500 shop mark, then 750. Buddy was constantly learning, becoming more accurate, more helpful. The tech press started mentioning us alongside major players in the automotive software space. For the first time since Grandpa died, I felt truly at peace. I'd built something meaningful, something that helped people, something that made the world a little more honest. And I'd found my own path, distinct from the family legacy but honoring its core values. I even started having dinner at Dad and Linda's occasionally. Chad was notably absent from these gatherings, having taken a job with an auto parts chain in Atlanta. The conversations were sometimes stilted, but they were happening. Progress. Then, late one evening as I was closing up the garage, I heard a knock on the glass door. Through the logo, I could see my father standing outside, alone, his expression serious. I let him in, curious about this unexpected visit. "Got a minute?" he asked, glancing around at the darkened shop. "Sure," I replied, leading him back to my office. "Everything okay?" He sat heavily in the chair across from my desk, looking older than his years. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the convention," he began. "About Kelly's, about what your grandfather built, about the future." I waited, sensing there was more. "I thought I had it all figured out," he continued. "Thought Chad was the answer. But I was wrong." My father, admitting he was wrong. The world truly was full of surprises. "I think we need to talk," he said. "About Kelly's, about the future, about bringing the family back together." I realized then that the story I thought had reached its conclusion was actually just beginning a new chapter. And whatever came next would change everything. Again, I offered my father a cup of coffee. The good stuff, not the questionable sludge we'd survived on in our early garage days. He accepted, but just held it between his hands, staring at the steam rising from the mug. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Dad had never been much for words, but this was different. He seemed to be gathering courage for something. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It looked official, company letterhead from Kelly's auto shop. He placed it on my desk, but kept his hand on it. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months," he began, his voice rougher than usual. "But I'm not good with words, never have been." He slid the paper toward me. I wrote it down instead. "The truth is I was wrong, son. Not for the business, though I was wrong about that too, but wrong for you. You deserve better." I unfolded the letter, my hand suddenly unsteady. It was short, just a few paragraphs, but I could imagine how much each word had cost him. My father, apologizing in writing because he couldn't trust his voice to say the words. I felt my chest tighten as I read his acknowledgement of how he'd let Chad push me out, how he'd been too stubborn to see the value of my ideas, how he betrayed not just me, but my grandfather's vision for Kelly's. Sitting there, looking at my father's slumped shoulders, I remembered something Grandpa told me once while we were rebuilding a transmission. Forgiveness isn't weakness, Travis. It's strength. Holding grudges is easy. Letting go takes real power. I folded the letter carefully and looked at my father. Thank you for this. It means a lot. He nodded, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away. There's more. Kelly's is in trouble. Serious trouble. I'd suspected as much. The local grapevine had been buzzing about declining business at the old shop, but I hadn't realized how bad it was. Chad's management style didn't exactly inspire customer loyalty, Dad explained, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. The books are a mess. We're behind on supplier payments. The bank's threatening to call on our loan, and half the staff has quit. He took a deep breath. Linda came to see me yesterday. She wants you to bail out Chad. Me? I couldn't hide my surprise. After everything they did? Dad shrugged. You're the success story now. They know it. The whole town knows it. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. The irony wasn't lost on me. The son they'd pushed out now being asked to rescue them. Part of me, a small, petty part I'm not proud of, wanted to enjoy watching Chad fail. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. What are you asking exactly? I asked carefully. Nothing, Dad replied. I'm just telling you how things stand. What you do with that information is up to you. You don't owe Chad anything. I nodded slowly. And what about you? What do you want? He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. I want to fix what I broke. Not just the shop, our family. The next day, I called a meeting at my office. Dad came, along with Linda and a clearly uncomfortable Chad. Derek insisted on being there too, sitting beside me in silent support. Chad looked terrible. Designer clothes still impeccable, but with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous tick in his jaw. The swagger was gone, replaced by barely concealed desperation. Linda laid out their situation in more detail than Dad had. It was worse than I'd thought. Chad had taken out high-interest loans to fund his failed Kelly's Connect system, then more loans to cover the first ones. He'd alienated long-time customers with pushy upselling tactics and cut corners on quality to boost short-term profits. We need $120,000 to keep the doors open, she concluded, looking directly at me. We can offer you controlling interest in Kelly's. Chad flinched at that, but stayed silent. I looked at each of them in turn, remembering all the history between us, good and bad. Then I made my offer. I'll cover half the debt, I said calmly, as a loan, not an investment, and only if Chad agrees to step away from management completely. Chad's face flushed red. So that's your play? Force me out like I did to you? Real mature. I shook my head. This isn't about revenge, Chad. It's about saving a business that's been in my family for 2 generations. You had your chance to run it your way. The results speak for themselves. Linda put a restraining hand on Chad's arm as he started to protest. What are your terms? She asked pragmatically. Dad runs daily operations. I'll provide guidance on implementing some AutoBuddy systems to rebuild customer trust. The loan gets paid back from profits, no interest. And Chad, I turned to face him directly. You can stay involved if you actually want to learn the business from the ground up, starting with changing oil and rotating tires. Just like I did. His expression made it clear what he thought of that idea. 3 days later, Dad called to tell me Chad had taken a job in Florida selling timeshares. Linda was staying behind, having decided their marriage was another failed business venture best wound down. And Dad was back in the garage full-time, slowly rebuilding Kelly's reputation, one honest repair at a time. I'd wire the money the same day we made the agreement. Not for Chad. He'd made his choices. But for my father and for the legacy my grandfather had created. A month after that meeting, Derek showed up at my office with a 6-pack of craft beer and a proposal. I've been thinking, he said, popping the caps off 2 bottles. We're making good money now. Real money. We should do something with it besides upgrading servers and hiring more developers. I took a swig of the beer, some local IPA with a ridiculous name and excellent flavor. What did you have in mind? Scholarships, he replied, for young mechanics who want to start their own businesses. Kids with grease under their fingernails and dreams in their heads. Kids like you were. The idea resonated immediately. I'd been lucky to have Derek's technical expertise and my own family background in the industry. Not everyone got those advantages. The AutoBuddy Future Mechanics Fund. I said, testing the name. I like it. We could offer not just money, but mentorship, business training, technology integration. Derek nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. I was thinking 10 scholarships to start, $25,000 each, plus a full AutoBuddy system for their shop and ongoing support. I was that kid once. I mused, working for minimum wage, learning everything I could, dreaming of running my own place someday. I want them to have the chance I almost lost. We launched the program 3 months later, with a surprisingly emotional video announcement filmed in my first grimy garage. Applications poured in from across the country, young mechanics with innovative ideas and the drive to make them happen. Our first class of scholarship recipients included a 22-year-old woman specializing in electric vehicle conversions, a former military mechanic creating a mobile repair service for rural communities, and an immigrant from Vietnam who'd learned mechanics by fixing his family's delivery vans and now wanted to open a shop focusing on hybrid vehicles. I mentored them personally, sharing not just technical knowledge, but the hard-won wisdom about business, family, and staying true to your values when it would be easier to compromise. In their eager faces, I sometimes caught glimpses of myself at their age, and occasionally glimpses of my grandfather. Meanwhile, AutoBuddy continued its explosive growth. We expanded internationally, adapted Buddy to understand multiple languages, and developed new features based on user feedback. The company valuation hit $350 million, then $500 million. We had offices in 3 cities and over 100 employees. Dad managed to save Kelly's, implementing a simplified version of AutoBuddy and focusing on rebuilding relationships with longtime customers. We had dinner together most Sundays now, our conversations growing easier with time. He never directly mentioned the letter he'd written, and I never brought it up. Some things don't need to be discussed once they've been acknowledged. 3 years after our confrontation at the convention, I found myself standing outside my flagship garage late one evening. The neon honesty is our engine sign glowed in the twilight, while inside, the mechanics were finishing up the day's last repairs, Buddy's AI silently monitoring and assisting. Through the large windows, I could see customers in the comfortable waiting area, watching their repairs on tablets, asking questions through the app, receiving clear explanations. No mystery, no anxiety, no wondering if they were being ripped off. From a battered old radio, the same model Grandpa used to have at Kelly's, came familiar strains of a Bruce Springsteen song. I smiled at the coincidence. Dad had said I would ruin the family business. Instead, I created a new one. And somewhere along the way, I'd help rebuild our family too. Not the way it was before, but something different, something stronger. I thought about the journey, from washing tools at Kelly's to running a multi-million-dollar tech company. From the angry young man who'd thrown down his wrench to the person I'd become. The failures, the successes, the lessons learned. Grandpa would have been proud, not of the money or the recognition, but of how we transformed an industry built too often on mistrust into one that could be transparent and honest, of how we'd given thousands of independent mechanics the tools to compete with big chains without compromising their integrity. I pulled out my keys, ready to lock up the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. The journey wasn't over. It never really is. But now I had the tools to navigate it. Life is like an old engine. Sometimes you have to take it apart completely, down to the smallest bolt, before you understand how it works. And when you put it back together, you might find you built something better than before. As for Chad, last I heard he'd been fired from the timeshare job and was selling cryptocurrency investment schemes on Instagram. Some engines can't be rebuilt. But that's another story altogether.